Book of Heaven, Volume 20, Part 12. December 6th, 1926. Pact between Jesus and the soul. How an act can only be called perfect when the divine will reigns in it. This morning it seemed that my always lovable Jesus did not make me struggle so much for his coming. Even more, he even spent a long time with me, which he had not done for so long. In fact, if he comes now, his little visit is always very short, nor does he give me time to tell him anything. He alone says what he wants to tell me, or he speaks and speaks with the endless light of his volition. So much so that Jesus himself remains eclipsed in this light, and I with him. And so we both lose sight of each other, because that light is so strong and dazzling that the littleness and weakness of my sight cannot sustain it. Therefore I lose everything, and also Jesus. Now, while he was with me, the fidgets of his love were such and so many that his heart was beating very strongly. Leaning his chest upon mine, he made me feel his ardent heartbeats, and drawing his lips close to mine, he poured into me part of that fire that was burning him. It was a liquid that, while being like liquid fire, was so very sweet, but of a sweetness that cannot be described. However, among those rivulets that poured into my mouth, coming out of his mouth like many little fountains, there were some bitter rivulets that the human ingratitude was sending deep into the heart of my sweet Jesus. Jesus had not done all this for a long time, while before he used to do it almost every day. Now, after pouring himself out with me, after pouring into me what he had in his most holy heart, he said to me, "My daughter, we must make a pact, that you must do nothing without me, and I must do nothing without you." And I, "My love, it is beautiful. I like this pact, to do nothing without you. And when you do not come, what shall I do? So I must remain idle and without doing anything? And then you place your will in me? And I am unable to will anything but what you want? So you shall always win, and shall do whatever you want, and without me." And Jesus, all goodness, resumed his speaking. "My daughter, when I do not come, you must not remain without doing anything. No, no, you must continue doing what we have done together, what I have told you that I want you to do. This is not doing things without me, because it has already passed between me and you, and it remains as if you were always doing it together with me. And besides, don't you want me to always win? The winning of your Jesus is your gain. So if you win, you lose. If you lose, you win. However, be certain that I shall do nothing without you. This is why I placed in you my will, and with it my light, my sanctity, my love, my strength, so that if you want my light, my sanctity, my love, my strength, you may dominate in them and take the light you want, and the sanctity, the love, the strength that you want to possess. How beautiful it is to see you possess my dominions that make me reach the extent of doing nothing without you. These pacts I can only make with the one in whom my will dominates and reigns. Then after this I was doing my usual acts in the supreme Fiat, and I thought to myself that I wanted to hide my little love, my meager adoration, and everything I could possibly do within the first acts that Adam did when he possessed the unity of the light of the divine will, and within those of the Queen Mamma that were all perfect. And my adored Jesus added, "My daughter, only when an act encloses within itself all other acts together, then can it be called perfect. And my will alone encloses this perfect act, that while it does one act alone, all possible and imaginable acts that exist in heaven and on earth gush forth from this single act. This single act of my will is symbolized by a font. While the font is one, from it gush seas, rivers, fire, light, heaven, stars, flowers, mountains, and earth. Everything comes out of this one font. Now, Adam in the state of innocence and the height of the sovereign queen, by possessing my will, if they loved, in that love they enclosed adoration, glory, praise, blessing, prayer. Nothing was missing in their littlest act. In it flowed the multiplicity of the qualities of the single act of my supreme volition that made them embrace everything. And so in one act they gave to their Creator whatever befitted him. So, if they loved, they adored. If they adored, they loved. Isolated acts that do not embrace all acts together cannot be called perfect. They are meager acts that give of human will. And therefore, only in the Fiat can the soul find true perfection in her acts and offer a divine act to her Creator. December 8th, 1926. How the one who lives in the divine will is the echo and the little sun. How these writings come from the heart of our Lord. The works of our Lord are veils that hide the noble queen of the divine will. I was doing my usual acts in the eternal volition, and my always lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, you are our echo. As you enter into our will in order to love, to praise, to ask for the coming of our kingdom, we hear in you the echo of our love, the echo of our glory, the echo of our Fiat that wants to come upon earth in order to reign, that wants to be prayed and prayed again. and pressed to come to reign on earth as it does in heaven. And as you pray your round through the whole creation to follow the acts of the supreme will in it, we hear your echo in the sea, in the valleys, on the mountains, in the sun, in the heavens, in the stars, in everything. How beautiful is this echo! It is our echo that resounds in all our things. In this echo, we hear the echo of our voice, the motion of our works, the treading of our steps, the motions, the pulsation of our heartbeat. And we greatly delight in seeing your littleness, as you, while echoing, try to imitate our voice, try to copy the motions of our works, to make the same sound as our steps, and to love with our own heartbeat. Then sighing, he added, "My daughter, if the sun had reason, and saw a plant, a being, that wanted to become sun, the sun would increase all of its light, its heat, and all of its effects over this being, so as to make it become sun. And even though it would not deny its light and its effects to the other beings, because it is in the nature of light to diffuse and to do good to all, wherever it is, the fortunate being which received altogether all the reflections and all the goods that the sun contains, would become sun. What glory, what contentment would the sun not receive in being able to form another sun? The entire earth, for many centuries, has never attested to it so much glory, so much love, by receiving its many effects, as this one being that has turned into sun. By living in our Fiat, the soul does nothing other than imitate her Creator, and the eternal sun concentrates all of its reflections upon her in such a way that she becomes the little sun in the likeness of the divine sun. Was this not precisely our purpose and our saying, "Let us make man in our image and likeness"? To make him without his having to be like us and carry within himself the image of he who had created him, would be neither decorous nor worthy of a work of our hands, nor would it be power of that regenerative breath that came out of our womb to generate a being dissimilar from us. What would be said of a mother who generated not a child who had eyes, mouth, hands, feet, and would be similar to her in all members, at most smaller than her in all members, but lacking nothing of all the organs of the mother, but generated a plant, a bird, a stone, things that are dissimilar from her? It would be incredible. Things against nature and unworthy of a mother, who was not able to infuse her image and all of her members in her newborn. Now, if all things generate and form things similar to themselves, much more so does God, first generator, whose honor and glory in forming the creatures was to form them as similar to himself. Therefore, my daughter, Let your flight in my will be continuous, that it may concentrate its rays upon you, and darting through you, it may make of you its little sun. After this I was feeling as though tired, and could not make up my mind to write what my adored Jesus had told me. And Jesus, surprising me, to give me will and strength in order to do it, told me, "My daughter, don't you know that these writings of ours come from the depth of my heart, and in them I make flow the tenderness of my heart, to touch those who shall read them, and the firmness of my divine speech, to strengthen them in the truths of my will? In all the sayings, truths, examples, that I make you write on paper, I make flow the dignity of my celestial wisdom, in such a way that those who read them, or shall read them, if they are in grace, shall feel within themselves my tenderness, the firmness of my speech, and the light of my wisdom, and as though in between magnets, they shall be drawn into the knowledge of my will. Those who are not in grace, then, shall not be able to deny that it is light, and light always does good. It never does harm. It illuminates. It warms. It makes one discover the most hidden things, and moves one to love them. Who can say he does not receive good from the sun? No one. More than sun, I am issuing these writings from within my heart, that they may do good to all. This is why I have so much interest that you write, because of the great good I want to do to the human family. So much so that I look upon them as my own writings, because it is always I, he who dictates, and you are the little secretary of the long story of my will. Then I was following in the divine will everything that my sweet Jesus had done while being on earth in his humanity, and I asked in each one of his acts that his fiat be known, and that it come triumphantly to reign in the midst of creatures. And my highest and only good, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, just as all creation is veil that hides my will, in the same way my humanity and all of my works, tears, and pains, are as many veils that hide my supreme fiat. It reigned in my acts, triumphant and dominating, and it laid the foundations in order to come to reign in the human acts of creatures. But do you know who tears these veils to let it come out to dominate in her own heart? The one who recognizes it in each one of my acts and invites it to come out. She tears the veil of my works. She enters into them. She recognizes the noble queen, and she prays it. She presses it to no longer remain hidden. And opening her heart to it, she invites it to enter. She tears the veil of my tears of my blood, of my pains, the veil of the sacraments, the veil of my humanity, and giving her subjection to it, she implores it to no longer remain veiled, but to make itself known as Queen that it is, in order to take its dominion and form the children of its kingdom. From here the necessity that you pray year-round in our volition and in all our works, to find the noble Queen of our will hidden in them, so as to pray it to unveil itself, to come out of its apartments, so that all may know it, and let it reign. December 10th, 1926. How the divine will is a continued act that never ceases. How the Virgin let herself be dominated by this act, and formed its life within herself. How in heaven, in the feasts of the Virgin, they celebrate the divine will. My poor mind was swimming in the unending sea of the eternal volition, and my adorable Jesus showed as the greatest prodigy how his most holy will, while being so immense, would restrict itself within the creature, though remaining immense, in order to dominate her and form its life in her. The creature, who would remain immersed under a continued act of this divine will, was the miracle of miracles, and the prodigy never before seen. And lovable Jesus, all goodness, told me, "Dearest daughter of my will, you must know that only my volition possesses a continued act that never ceases. This act is full of life, and therefore it gives life to everything. It preserves everything, and it maintains balance within itself and in all things. It alone can boast about possessing this continuous act of always giving life, of loving always, always, without ceasing for one instant. My humanity itself, if it possesses this continued act, it is because in it flowed this continued act of the supreme Fiat. How long did the life of my humanity last upon earth? It was extremely short. As soon as I fulfilled what was necessary for the redemption, I departed for my celestial fatherland, though my acts remained. But these remained because they were animated by the continued act of my will. On the other hand, my will never departs. It is always at its place, pre-existing, without ever interrupting its act of life over everything that came out of it. Oh, if my will departed from earth and from all created things, all things would lose their life and would resolve into nothing. Because my will created all things from nothing, if it withdrew, they would all lose their existence. Now, do you want to know who is she who let herself be dominated by this continuous act of my supreme will, and never giving life to her own, received this continuous act of life of divine will in such a way as to form within herself a life fully divine and in the likeness of her Creator. It was the celestial and sovereign Queen. From the very first instant of her immaculate conception, she received this active life of divine will, to then receive it continuously during all of her life. This was the greatest prodigy, the miracle never before seen, the life of the divine will in the Empress of Heaven. In fact, one single act of life of this Fiat can issue heavens, suns, seas, stars, and everything at once. So all the human acts placed before a single act of life of this will of mine are like many drops of water that dissolve within the ocean, like tiny little flames before the sun, like atoms in the great space of the universe. Imagine yourself what the height of the Immaculate Queen possesses, with this life of continuous act of divine will formed in her. This was the true miracle, the prodigy never before seen, that the littleness of the celestial sovereign enclosed within herself a divine life, a will immense and eternal, that possesses all possible and imaginable goods. Therefore, in all the feasts with which the Church honors my Mamma, all heaven celebrates, glorifies, praises, and thanks the supreme will, because they see its life in her, the primary cause by which she obtained the longed-for Redeemer. And therefore, because this Fiat had life that dominated and reigned in her, they find themselves in possession of the celestial Jerusalem. It was precisely the divine will that formed its life in this excelling creature, who opened heaven that had been closed by the human will. Therefore, with justice, while they celebrate the Queen, they celebrate the supreme Fiat that made her Queen, reigned in her, formed its life, and is the primary cause of their eternal happiness. So, a creature who lets my will dominate and gives it free field in order to form its life in her is the greatest of prodigies. She can move heaven and earth, even God himself, as if she were doing nothing, while she does everything. And she alone can win the most important things, destroy all obstacles, face anything, because a divine will reigns in her. And just as all the power of the Fiat dwelling in the creature was needed in order to impetrate redemption, and my humanity, that possessed that power, was needed in order to form it, in the same way, in order to impetrate the coming of the kingdom of my Fiat itself, another creature is needed, who would let it dwell within herself and give it free field in order to form its life, so that my will itself, through her, may accomplish the one and most important prodigy. It's coming to reign on earth as it does in heaven. And because this is the greatest thing that shall place divine balance in the human family, I do great things in you. I centralize in you everything that is necessary and decorous to know about this kingdom of mine. The great good it wants to give, the happiness of those who shall live in it, its long story, its long sorrow, and of many centuries. Because while it wants to come to reign in the midst of creatures, to make them happy, they do not open the doors to it. They do not long for it. They do not invite it. And while it is present in their midst, they do not know it. Only a divine will could bear with such invincible patience being in their midst, giving them life, and being not even known. My will is great, endless, and infinite, and wherever it reigns, it wants to do things worthy of its greatness, of its sanctity, and of the power it contains. Therefore, be attentive, my daughter. This is not about just anything, or about forming a sanctity, but it is about forming a kingdom for my adorable and divine will. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 20, Part 12. Fiat.